how can you start getting yourself out of survival mode? There are people who think, oh, well, I got to work 2 jobs in order to make, a living. It's like, no, you're addicted to that survival mode. You're addicted to operating in that energy of stress and anxiety. You can land yourself a really one job
Right.
that's fabulous paying, right? That can
Yeah.
supersede the 2 jobs you're working, right? So it's like, again, that limiting belief of how we've convinced ourselves, I have to work really hard. Money is hard. Life is hard, right? So it's like creating moments where we can step outside of that narrative and pull ourselves out.
Welcome to the Chingona Revolution podcast, where we will bring out your inner badass Latina, overcome self-doubt, help you gain clarity, and pave your own path, all while leading with courage. I am your host, Latina coach and speaker, Erica Cruz. Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of Chingona Revolution. I've been wanting to bring this guest on for quite a while because this individual has had such a profound impact in my life. I first met her at We All Grow in 2019 when I was there as a volunteer. I think I took a photo for you or something like that. But I remember just feeling so drawn to her and I didn't know why. And to give you all just some context, I grew up in a Catholic family. And then I went to a Christian middle school. So I went from Catholicism to Christianity, and then I went to UC Berkeley, and then I was like, forget all religion. This is horrible. Why would we, use religion to manipulate people? And I really got away from just religion and spirituality. And it wasn't until I started following this individual who really helped me reconnect with my spirituality and helped remove fear from spirituality and from tarot cards and different things like that. So this person is none other than Jasmin, also known as Esoteric Esa. You, Jasmin, are what I would consider a spiritual mentor of mine. I don't think I've ever actually said that to you, but I've obviously been a client of yours for a while. I've taken your courses. I'm part of your Patreon. I've had a lot of one-on-one sessions with you, which are greatly, greatly appreciated. I feel like you've helped me navigate big shifts in my life. And I'm just so honored to have you on the podcast. So welcome.
Oh, Erica, thank you for your sweet words. I mean, I'm so grateful we met this lifetime. The minute we first connected, I was like, these are my people. She's my people. When you just meet people and you're like, they're my vibe, and I'm just so grateful for all the spiritual investment you've done into yourself. And I love seeing how you reflect that back into our community and your coaching community as well. So equally so, you are doing spiritual work too. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself for people who don't know you. I think most of the people in my community follow you as well, but there may be some people who this is their first time
Yeah.
hearing about you. So give us the spiel.
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Southern California, grew up out, in the 626 area. Yes, that's still part of LA County. People are always like 626. That's not an area code we know from LA. It is. I, grew up in a beautiful family of 4, but similar to you, it was very religious focused. As a Latina, of course, my dad he ran the household and he had a strong influence, but at a very early age I was a very introspective hermit child, and I questioned very deeply and thoughtfully, and my parents say I was a pain in the butt lovingly because I didn't mean to, but I was always kind of wanting to contradict the status quo in terms of how they were running and raising me. And I always like to say Catholicism didn't raise me. It was just part of my life, but it was a huge influence. And, I'm a creative entrepreneur, and I just love collaborating with like-minded creative people like yourself. And I get so much inspiration with working with women and femmes in particular. So I'm really excited to be here with everybody who's tuning in. Thank you for listening.
Amazing. So tell us a little bit about you already alluded to this a little bit, but tell us a little bit about your childhood and at what point did you realize, oh, I'm connected?
Yeah, so crazy you asked this because I was reflecting on this a couple weeks ago with my dad, and I wanted to tell him the first time I saw a ghost because I had never really told him that. I shared it with my mom when I was younger. I was in elementary. I want to say it was around 6 or 5, and it was when my bisabuela, my great grandma, died, and my great aunt used to live across from her house, my bisabuela's house in East LA, till this day, till her dying day. My great aunt still lived there. So we used to have to pass by. We call her grandma, even though she was my great grandma. We used to have to pass by great grandma's house to go visit my aunt. And I remember one time we were pulled up. I was in the car with my brother. My mom was like, "This is just gonna be really fast. I'm gonna get out, give something to your tia." And I remember turning and looking because my tia's house, is on this side, and right across is my bisabuela's house. And she was already dead. They had already sold the house to someone else. And I look to my left and I see her spirit on the porch, and I just freaked out. I was terrified. And my mom got back into the car. Noticeably, she saw my demeanor change. She's like, "What's going on? Like, why are you acting fearful?" And I said, I think I saw something. I don't want to look at grandma's house. I'm scared." And she's like, and of course, what do we do? Immediately we shut it out. She's like, "You're seeing things. Don't pay attention to that. That doesn't exist." So after that, I just started blocking those kind of things out. So I would say, to answer your question, it was in elementary school, early on, when I was able to see a spirit and notice, like, when you're little, you're like, is this another realm? You weren't really thinking that, but I knew there was something different about that experience.
I love that you said it was immediately shut out, because while this example
Yeah.
is about spirits, I feel like this happens a lot just in our culture in general, right? When we want to follow our intuition, or when we feel something, it's immediately shut out, and then we almost lose the connection with our true self. But I had a similar experience. I don't think I've ever like shared this with anybody actually, but I remember I must have been 6 years old or something, because my parents were still together and I was in our home that I grew up in. And I remember seeing like a little boy and a little girl at the end of our hallway, and I freaked out. And I ran
Yeah.
to the living room, and then ever since then I shut it out myself. It was like, "Oh no, that's not safe." And I remember just being like a very fearful child, but again, growing up in a Catholic household where it's such a fear-based, I mean, and no shade to religion, because I think community and religion can be really helpful for people. But in general, it's a very fear-based teaching. So I scared myself out of ever, and I haven't seen anything since, but I do know that I'm like spiritually connected. But that was the first experience. And I'm glad to hear that you also got scared, because I was like, maybe I was just dreaming. Maybe this didn't actually happen. But thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. Look at this, dropping the tea today. And you saw two spirits at once. So first of all, that's overwhelming.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you began to reconnect then.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could say I was privileged to have a grandma, who's my mom's mom, right? So the bisabuela I saw is my grandma's mom, right? My great grandma. So my grandma, my mom's mom, was very open about her practice. And she was a tarot reader. She was a psychic, right? A lot of people kind of know this at this point. So growing up, my mom would allow me to go sleep. My parents would allow me to go sleep over grandma's house. And that was kind of our little secret time together, where, grandma would plant these seeds. She would take me to gem shows, and she'd be like, "Okay, what crystals do you want?" Because she used to sell crystals, right? She was an entrepreneur. She would go to farmers markets and do tarot readings and sell crystals way before the hype. So I had my grandma to hold space for me. But then when I would come back home, it was kind of like this shame and this secrecy, because I didn't want to come back and share it, because I knew, right, it wasn't really cool to do that. I just knew it was bad in some sort of way. So I had my grandma, as early as 9, help support me dig into spirituality. But of course, I didn't know she was doing that.
Wow. And so now I'm just curious, if your grandmother was so tapped in into and connected, was your mom not, being her daughter? And like that must be
So
so
my
interesting to have
Mhm.
a grandparent that's so connected, and then maybe, I mean, I'm making assumptions here. I don't really know this, but was your mom not that supportive of it?
Mhm. Mm-hmm. The dichotomy. My mom wasn't necessarily like, this is bad. It was fear. Like
Mm.
my mom lived, and I love my mom, and I want to speak with her to a lot of respect. And she's grown a lot over this journey of me doing this
Mhm.
work. But my mom definitely is psychic. She is intuitive. Like she's told me her experiences. It's always passed down, right, in that lineage. But my mom lived a very fearful life because my grandma would tell her experiences. Like my grandma was very open with us, and she told me, like, I can't tell your mom these stories, so I'm going to tell you these stories because I know you can handle it. My grandma would be like, oh, today a demon, kept bothering me and I had to banish it. All these things that the normal person would be like, that's really crazy, right? Going into that mental health stigma in our Latina
Yeah.
culture, right? So that's why it was like my mom shut it out because she was sitting more in the fear,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know, and she wasn't really wanting to explore it.
Yeah.
It was safer to be in the fear.
Yeah. So talking about the fear, I feel like that's also what stops a lot of people in our community from tapping into spirituality. And
Mm-hmm.
I always felt safe with you, which is why obviously I've taken many of your courses. And especially being part of your Patreon when you do like the pick a card thing, it was like my favorite, right? To just like watch your card pulling. And I've
Oh.
always been drawn to cards, but I remember
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how much my parents shamed cards, right? And no, that's like that's not
Yeah.
good. It's brujeria. And now it's like we're almost
Mm-hmm.
reclaiming this word of bruja. So it's so crazy, right? That
Yep.
we're
Yep.
it's happening where we're reclaiming it. But I guess with this topic of fear, I was in that category as well. And now as I'm sitting in an Airbnb, I could see a tarot deck, one, two, three
Uh-huh.
oracle decks, including yours, because I always travel with yours. So now I'm like traveling around with these things, but I was so terrified. So, with our community being so afraid, what do you think is that? What do you think they are fearing, and how can they overcome that fear if it's something they want to do?
Absolutely. I think when it comes from a very religious context, like whether it was Christianity or Catholicism, what's been passed down to us from our elder generation, our parents, great grandparents, the fear is more so like you're taught, don't manipulate God's will. Right. Because that's what tarot does. That's what, working with crystals does. That's what all these divination tools do. It allows you to have foresight, but the foresight is to go inward. It's less about really predicting the future, even though we can do that, as you know, right? But it's more about going inward and being able to change God's will through self awareness, right? Accountability, healing. But the older generation is really fixated on like, we don't go against whatever God wants us to experience, right? So that's why it's demonic, because it's going against God's word. Does that make sense? That's where the fear is. And I think also some of it, I know I paused, but let me just add this to it. I think also some of it is like, even to this day, I still get met with friends and family, college friends, who are terrified of what I do. They don't agree with it. They still slightly judge me. I don't hold it against them. It's just part of like their indoctrination. And we get scared of meeting people who are intuitive or empaths or psychics because you can't hide the shadow from them. We can pick up on when you're being ingenuine, when you're being inauthentic, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when people want to mask things, right, when they want to be a false sense of self with you, you're a threat to
Yeah.
them.
Wow.
Hmm. That
Yeah,
hits, right? That hits.
it does. And
Hmm.
I think the more you get into this work, you can't unsee what people's true
Yes.
colors are, and it
Yes.
requires you to shed old relationships that no longer fit where you're going. And that's really difficult
Yes.
as well. But I feel like the more
It is.
in tune to my spirituality I get, I just don't have the patience for, I can be in a physical space and say, oh, this
Exactly.
isn't the vibration I want to be in. I'm ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also requires this like fine balance of discernment of like really applying the practice of
Yeah.
empathy, right? I am empathetic to that person because either they don't know any better or like they don't want to change. So I can understand the fear why they're hesitant towards the change, right? But then it's also that fine balance of, like you said, as you ascend, right? As you get ascended with yourself, meaning just deeper, more authentic with yourself, you do have to let relationships go. And it's sad. Like I'm in a place in my life right now, Erica, where it is a little bit lonely. I have to self-isolate quite a bit, because it's just like it's overwhelming because a lot of people are so stuck in not doing the
Mm-hmm.
work. They're so stuck in the matrix, right? And so as people who are empathetic and intuitive, it can be a lot on our spirits. It's a little bit
Mm-hmm.
disheartening, right? Especially when you're coming from a very vulnerable, authentic, loving place and you meet people who aren't able to meet you in that space. It bashes your spirit, and then you need to take time to repair that, right? To regenerate. So, it's just like when people say the higher you get to climbing success, the more deeper with yourself and spiritual you get and you climb that, it gets
Yeah.
lonely. Just like they say, when you get to the top, it can be a lonely
Mm-hmm.
place
Yeah. Yeah.
because not everyone's meant to be there in that frequency with
Mm-hmm.
you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you and I have talked about this, but entrepreneurship is one of the biggest spiritual journeys you will ever go on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 1,000%. The best
Yeah.
one, though. The best one. I encourage everybody to be an entrepreneur, even if it's like a side
Yeah.
hustle. Just start that because you learn so much about
Yeah.
yourself.
You can't run from the shadows. It's literally
Cannot.
entrepreneurship is like a little flashlight that's like, oh, here's an insecurity that you get to address.
Absolutely. It teaches you a lot about your faith.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to, again, your self-confidence. Like, how much do you really believe you're worthy? How much do you really trust yourself? I think entrepreneurship for me really exposed my lack of self-trust and how to deepen
Yeah.
that.
Same for me. It's also helped me see that it's okay to make decisions, even if they're not the right ones, right? Like, because I struggled with
Yeah.
indecisiveness for so long, and I still do to this day. But
Mhm.
entrepreneurship has shown
Same.
me
Same.
you make a decision, and if it's the wrong one, you make a new decision, right? But like, the sooner you make a decision, the
Right.
sooner you can make another decision. Yeah,
Absolutely. Just don't get stuck.
exactly. Yes. So
Uh-huh.
I remember in one of the classes I took of yours, you talked about numerology and how this was something that was in the Bible and it was then removed. Can you tell us a little bit about that and first tell us what numerology is and then what you mentioned about the Bible?
Mm-hmm. Numerology is a form of esotericism, and esoteric simply translates to information that a small part of population are exposed to, right? It's a very niche form of information. So numerology is a language, just like money is a language, numbers are a language, and numerology operates off of energy. Every number has a frequency and an energy that you can then translate into, right? It's a vibration that you can co-create with, just like with your astro chart. And in the Bible, back in the day, they had no choice but to study energies, the planets, like astrology and
Mm-hmm.
crystals, all that was in the Bible, right? Eclipses, all of that. And so what you're referencing is in the Bible, and I'm not, a Bible expert here, but there is a part in the Bible that's called the Gnostics that's been removed from the Bible because the Gnostics has all of the occultism
Mm-hmm.
of numerology and crystals that was first integrated when the Bible came to be, but they removed that as a way to keep controlling that fear narrative of don't work with things like numerology that's esoteric, right? Because it's another way that people can liberate through this knowledge. So what do they want to do sometimes to keep us in order? Right? To abide by authority, you have to drive the narrative of fear.
Wow.
It's wild. And it's like, just do a Google search. It's there, like you're going to go down a rabbit hole. It's so interesting.
Yes. That is crazy. Okay, so what does the number 33 mean? I'm asking because I just turned 33 and then the Airbnb I ended up at is 333. I won't give the name of the street I'm on, but
No,
then
you might do
the
that.
backside of this is 3rd Avenue. So I was like, wait, what? There's just like so many
Oh,
threes. And then
wow.
I when I
Yeah.
arrived, I made like my first purchase and it was $33. And then yeah.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
whenever I went to I took some clients to dinner and our total was 333.99. And I was like, this is
Look at that.
insane.
This is eerie. This is eerie at this point, right? Like, so what Erica's explaining, we call that, Erica knows this, but for those who aren't familiar, we don't call that coincidence. We call that
Synchronicity.
synchronicity. Synchronicity is another energetic language that just lets you know you're on the frequency of those synchronicities. So in that case, what does 333 mean? That is the number of creativity, manifestation. In the Bible, they call that the Holy Trinity, the triangle, right? That's the most powerful form of sacred geometry we could use, is the triangle. So you're 33. We like to joke and say that you're in your Jesus year because Jesus passed away at 33. I know. But 33 is actually a master number. And 333 is in that context. So what does that mean? It means that it's a heightened sense of manifesting. And with 3, that means you have potential to be more creative, to tap into. Also, that's the realm of the ascended masters in number frequencies. And ascended masters are like different spiritual guides, spirit beings. Have you connected with an ascended master as a spirit guide yet? Have you met one yet that you know of?
So you told me, wait, an ascended master? That's not an archangel then.
Mm-hmm.
That would be
Mm-hmm.
like Jesus,
No.
Buddha.
Kuan Yin, yeah, Saint Germain. So ascended masters are people who essentially walked the earth. They reached enlightenment, so they don't have a purpose to
Yeah.
reincarnate, right? Because they've reached enlightenment, so now they're part of consciousness where they can help support the collective, the greater good. They don't have a hidden
Yeah.
agenda.
So yesterday when I was meditating, I for the first time saw this guide come up. It was a man with a white vest.
Oh, that's so interesting. Did he feel galactic and like
Yes.
spacey or like
He felt it was
cosmic?
definitely just like reflection of light. This is just in a meditation from YouTube.
Yeah. 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 So there's what's called the Galactic Federation, and they're star people, and who you met sounds like one of the leaders of the Galactic Federation who is an ascended
Oh.
master. So we'll have to talk more
Okay.
offline about that. Oh, well, that's probably why I
Yeah.
asked, right?
And
It's
I was
like
like, I don't know who this person is, and I'm not going to force it. But what I learned through
right,
working with
right.
you and your courses is we have like spirit animals, spirit guides, and some of the spirit animals are hummingbirds. Hummingbirds come up whenever they affirm like it's a yes or everything's going to be okay. So usually I'm in the middle of freaking out about something, and then a hummingbird will come, and it's this confirmation, and that's happened over the last few years. It even happened when I was speaking at We All Grow, and I was like, maybe I just don't want to do this and I'll cancel. I was already there. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. And then I was walking back to my room, and a hummingbird just came up, and I captured a video of it because it came up to the in front of me. And sometimes they just like linger in the sky and then they take off. It did that.
Yes,
And it
yes.
was beautiful. And then lately I've also been seeing a black jaguar a lot.
Ooh,
Every time I'm
that's
afraid, and it's
powerful.
almost like this protection energy. So I've been seeing it in my dreams, and then I've been seeing it in my meditations. And then the other day I had a dream with a lot of snakes, which, as we know, religion
Oh,
teaches us that that's something to be afraid of. And in my dream I remember
that's
being
very
terrified,
scary. Mhm.
but then the snake didn't do anything to me, and then it started to move up, and then like around me. And I was like, is this some Kundalini stuff? Because I know nothing about Kundalini, but all I know is the snake.
Yes, yes. You are being activated by that serpent energy. Absolutely,
Okay. And then
absolutely.
I did a meditation the next day because I was like a little bit freaked out. And during this meditation, I heard follow the serpent, which is crazy because I would never call the snake,
Okay.
I would never call the snake a serpent.
Me and I just said serpentine energy, right? So there we go. There we go. Clear as day, y'all. This is why it helps to talk it through with friends, right? And spiritual community, because you can unlock things together better than just by
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah, definitely. I
right?
can't go talk to just anybody about
Mhm.
this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I get
So,
freaked out.
we talked about numerology, spirit guides. How do people find their spirit guides?
Yeah. I like to think that you've been connected with your spirit guides at an early age, and particularly the animal guides, meaning like were there certain animals that you had an affinity for early on? Like for me, I always loved horses. I always told my mom I wanted a horse. I wanted to have my own horse in a stable. Like I always felt connected to them. And lo and behold, later on, years later, I get a reading from someone and they tell me horses are one of my spirit animals. So I think it starts with your childhood, your inner child. Doing inner child work honestly helps you unlock so many
Mhm.
things in your spiritual journey, so many of your powers, your skills, your gifts. So go back to what were the things you were naturally curious or gravitating to as a child? Even your hobbies, your passions, what did you like reading about? Because all of that, when you're a child, you're channeling your higher self
Yeah.
very easily, right? Because you're still uninfluenced at that point, right? So I like to say, go back to recalling childhood. I know some people are like, well, I blocked that out. It's so repressed. It's so suppressed. Well, then you can just do a meditation like what Erica was talking about and ask your spirit guides, like, I'm ready to meet you. I'm ready to connect. Start showing me my everyday life, right? Who's a spirit guide? And if you're seeing hummingbirds, then it's the hummingbird, right? If you're seeing, I don't know, bunnies, like, we don't get to choose it. People are like, oh man, I got an ant. It's like, yeah, like, we don't choose our spirit guides. Like, respect all animals in the
Mhm.
animal kingdom. They all have a very valuable message and medicine for
Yeah.
us.
So how do you go about learning all these things? I mean, do you learn mainly through your intuition? Because a hummingbird can mean one thing to me and something else to somebody else, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And I think when you're first starting this journey and you're like, oh, I don't really know my intuition, I don't know how to unpack this or process it. So, like, again, how do you go about learning that? I definitely recommend you seek out, like, advisors, practitioners, but at the same time, don't put so much emphasis on like what Esoteric Esa says, right? Like if Erica's feeling the hummingbird means this and what Esoteric Esa said didn't really align or resonate, then that's valid. Like don't shut down your own
Yeah.
intuition in the process, right? Because sometimes we give a lot of external power to people who we view as in
Mhm.
positions of authority, right? And then we block ourselves back out again. I think people get a little bit tripped up on that. So, I think it's also a matter of um deciphering like these spiritual messages is just a matter of reconnecting with how honest or how inauthentic are you with yourself. It just goes back to self-trust, right? And if you're not listening to your body, you're not making time for yourself, you don't know how to trust yourself, you don't know how to love yourself, self-love, then you're not going to be able to unpack all these beautiful messages from the universe. You have to start rebuilding your relationship with yourself first. And again, that goes back to, I'm a big advocate doing your inner child
Yeah.
healing work. Like that's the biggest thing, the big egg you can crack open to everything is that connecting with your inner child.
Yeah. I can attest to this because I truly believe that the universe
Mhm.
put me back in my childhood room for 3 years so that I could work on my inner child.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, in that room, that's probably where you had all those dreams and all those downloads, right? And you probably journaled. Did you journal when you were younger, Erica? I could see you
Yeah, and my
totally
brother made
writing,
so much
right?
fun of
Like
me and
you
like would
were
grab the journal and read it. And of course, I called it a diary at that time and he just like laughed. But I
Yeah.
remember writing poetry to like help cope during my parents'
Mhm.
divorce. And I've never like
Yes.
obviously shared any of that, but yeah, and it's so funny that I've been telling like I lack of trust. I haven't really trusted myself because I wasn't the best student when I was in school. So
Mm.
I told myself I wasn't a good writer even though I journal every day and I'm writing every day, right? So one of the things I do see myself doing is writing a book of some sort and just doing more and practicing more
I
writing,
see
but
that.
it requires that self-trust.
Mhm. I totally see you writing a book. It's there. It's in your life code. It's there. It's just waiting to be birthed. That's why I don't think there's any rush. Like people are like, oh, I gotta hurry up and rush and write a book. It has to be this year. It's like you don't have to rush your gifts. Like it's already manifested in the timeline. Like you don't have to worry about that
Yeah.
happening.
Thank you for saying that. I receive it. So speaking about manifestation, I know a lot of people are I find that because we also have free will, right? So we have free will and we could create we have influence over our life and we
Yes.
can create our life, but sometimes when we come from an oppressed community, it can feel like, oh, life is happening to us, not for us. How do we empower people to manifest the life that they want and create the life that they want? Do you feel stuck in your life or business and aren't sure what's next for you? Do you feel like everyone seems to have things figured out, but you feel like you're missing something? I totally hear you. I was in your exact shoes just a few years ago, and this is why I've created my coaching programs. Courage Driven Latina is a 12-month group coaching program designed to help you take action on your courage project in just 90 days. Whether you're in the middle of a life transition, struggling with self-doubt, tired of starting and stopping a project, or feeling lonely in your goals and dreams, then this program is for you. A courage project can be starting a business, launching a podcast, starting your healing journey, or building the confidence to date after a divorce. No matter the project, my courage framework will help you overcome any obstacles and help you make your dreams a reality. Inside of Courage Driven Latina, you will build confidence, courage, and find a supportive community of driven women cheering you on every step of the way. Magnetic Mastermind is my advanced program for women entrepreneurs and leaders. This program is for those of you who have already started but are ready to grow without the hustle. You'll improve your strategy, spirituality, and self. You'll use my magnetic framework to attract, not chase, dream clients and opportunities. Remember, you are the creator of your reality. Don't let procrastination hold you back any longer. Go to theericacruz.com, that's Erica with a K, under Work With Me. It's also linked down below in the show notes where you can learn more about these programs, you can join the waitlist, and you will be the first to know when we open the doors. I cannot wait to work with you. Now, let's get back to the show.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of that starts with, this as a coach, with getting real and honest and writing down your limiting beliefs about the way you view yourself and your outlook on life, because we've been taught to be pessimistic. We've been taught to be cynical, because we reward that as critical thinking, right? And that's only to a certain extent. And it's a way of also coping with trauma and surviving, right? As people who come from BIPOC or just like underprivileged, communities. And so how do you go back? It's like you have to get honest about what's the truth behind that narrative that I've convinced myself to be my story. How much of that is my story, or was it like a story that was projected onto me as a generational cycle, or like a limiting belief that my mom or my dad had, right? Or that a teacher inflicted on you at an early age in third grade, and and you started believing that, right? So what do you think about that?
What do I think about the limiting beliefs? Yeah,
The limiting
no,
beliefs, yeah.
100%.
Like how that's like a core
Yeah, because it's
root, right?
essentially like the story that your limiting
Absolutely.
beliefs are the story that you're telling yourself. And the story you're telling yourself are the book that you're reading, right? So why don't you rewrite the story and tell yourself a better
Yes.
story so that you could take yourself on a different adventure?
And another thing is, like, in terms of manifesting, how can we start becoming like conscious, intentional manifestors? Because we're
Right.
manifesting every second, every single day. So how do we become more intentional? There's no such thing as perfecting the art of manifestation. You're never going to be a perfect manifester, because at the end of the day, there are external things that, energy is always changing. It's transient, right? You're co-creating with a lot of variables in life, but it has also, my recommendation is, right, because when you manifest, you need to place an emphasis on the lower chakras, the root chakra, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus chakras, which are the main chakras that we use to navigate this existence, this simulation. So going back to these factors of, survival mode. So how are you still repeating survival patterns, especially as an entrepreneur? Especially as an entrepreneur, or people who are single mothers who have 3 kids, or people who have to work 2 jobs to survive because of inflation. So when we're in that survival mode, we're in a limiting belief consciousness. we've lowered our frequency. So therefore we're not able to really expand our consciousness into higher realms because we're in tunnel vision, survive, 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 survive. So that's when we may not be
Yeah.
manifesting to our fullest ability, right? You want to manifest money, and then maybe it's like, oh, you get a $50 check in the mail, but you really wanted to manifest like, you know, a bigger annual income, right? So it's like going back to where are moments where you can create more rest. How can you start getting yourself out of survival mode? There are people who think, oh, well, I got to work 2 jobs in order to make, you know, a living. It's like, no, you're addicted to that survival mode. You're addicted to operating in that energy of stress and anxiety. You can land yourself a really one job
Right.
that's fabulous paying, right? That can
Yeah.
supersede the 2 jobs you're working, right? So it's like, again, that limiting belief of how we've convinced ourselves, I have to work really hard. Money is hard. Life is hard, right? So it's like creating moments where we can step outside of that narrative and pull ourselves out so we can start receiving more in the divine feminine
Ooh, can we talk
energy.
about the divine feminine energy?
Mm.
So,
Talk about her,
as you
baby.
know, I
I love
am a business owner. We've known each other
her.
for years at this point, and because I come from the tech industry,
Mhm.
because I come from a family where
Yes.
I have a father and a brother, I think I've always been conditioned to be in my masculine. Even when I look at my mom's always been a hustler. She's always
Yeah.
been a doer.
Yeah.
And as I started my
Mhm.
business, I feel entrepreneurship is pretty masculine, but it also requires some femininity. So I feel like I'm in a
Yes.
phase where I'm stepping more into my
Right.
feminine energy. And had you
Mhm.
told me I was
Mhm.
going to do this a few years ago,
Mhm.
I would be like, why?
No way.
So, can you talk
Why?
about the power of feminine energy? Obviously, for creation, we need both, right? So we all need to have masculine and feminine energy, but a
Right.
lot of times there could be an imbalance. So, can
Right.
you talk about what feminine energy is and
Yeah.
why it's important?
Yeah. Yes. So, okay, the balance of the masculine and the feminine, those are, you know, we're not talking about specific like, you know, cisgender, like identification with genders. We're talking about laws of the universe. There are elemental laws of the universe, which are feminine energy, masculine energy. And no matter what you identify gender wise, you have both. You have masculine within you to create, feminine within you to create. So the differentiation is, especially when it comes to manifesting, Erica, is you can manifest from 2 forms in this consciousness. You manifest either from the ego or you manifest from the soul. Both are valid, right? The masculine energy manifests from the ego,
Mm.
the one that we're taught to do here,
Mhm.
that we're really used to because of the patriarchy, because of Western society, because we've conditioned, right, on this earth that to be the majority, right? The majority group think everything has to operate from ego, particularly distorted ego, because there can be healthy ego. Then there's manifesting from the soul, which is manifesting from the feminine energy, which is more of the art of operating from the heart chakra. When you're manifesting from the ego, you can attain and you can accomplish a lot, but you're
More.
always going to be wanting more. You're always going to be saying,
Mhm.
what's next? That's how you can tell, am I operating more from ego as opposed to my divine feminine, which is in gratitude, right? Saying that what I have now is so amazing. I manifested this huge accomplishment, right? And I'm sitting in that frequency of like, this is abundance instead of already externally looking outward for what is
Yeah.
next. I'm unfulfilled. So that's why we say it's the art of receptivity. You know, if you have a problem with allowing yourself to
Mhm.
receive compliments, right? Receive money. If your friend wants to, you know, treat you to coffee, and you're like, oh, I got it. You know, people used to always be like, oh, I love your hair. And I used to always self-deprecate. Yeah, it's nice, but you know, my ends are split, or oh, my hair is so thin, right? I didn't
Mhm.
allow myself to receive. So it's little things like that when we talk
Yeah.
about the divine feminine, you know, instead of projecting and pushing. Okay,
And
what
we
are you
look,
thinking?
and you know what's so crazy? That culturally, we're almost taught to not receive, right? Because we look at it as this humble thing. It's like, oh no,
Oh,
like don't let people pay for you. Don't receive the compliments.
yes.
Be humble. But that's almost teaching us
Oh,
to
yes.
block off
Oh, yes.
femininity and like the feminine energy.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's creating this poverty aspect on femininity. It's just another way of suppressing the divine feminine archetype in the conscious collective. And I think a lot of that even shows up in spirituality as a spiritualist, as a spiritual practitioner. You know, the old world thinking is if you do spiritual work, you have to be
Mhm.
super, super humble. You have to do it free labor. And it's like, like, and people, right, the minute you're like, well, I'm a human being living this human existence and I have responsibilities and I don't do this work for free, people still have a hard time adjusting, and they're still rejecting the feminine energy by saying, well, no, that should be cheap labor, or it should be free labor when you work with the spiritualist, right? It's overpriced, right?
Yeah.
So you see how, like, it's just
Yeah.
so ingrained in us.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yes. And earlier we were talking about like numerology and how this stuff is really empowering and almost so it was removed. And as you were talking about that, I was like, wow, like
Mm.
there's almost this shame around spirituality and being connected, but there's also shame around sensuality and sexuality, which is also something that religion has deprived us of. I don't know how I jumped here, but I was like, yeah, well, the root cause of
It is
all this is,
connected.
or the thing that connects it is shame, right? Shame around practicing spirituality in a way that looks different than what the church has you do. And then shame around pleasure, which is receiving. Maybe that's why I went to it.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I use that analogy, like, it's so interesting to me how it's fascinating how we're taught to jump into bed with other people and be intimate, but no matter how uncomfortable or awkward, like, no matter how much, like, we self-deprecate our bodies, right? Oh, I'm imperfect, and we shame ourselves, right? But I'll still go and be intimate and have, sex with this person. But then when it comes to the act of being intimate and self-pleasure with yourself, oh, forget that, right? Like,
Right.
that is like cringe, right? That takes a lot of, like, right? When
Mm-hmm.
it should be the opposite. It should be that at an early age, we should be taught to self-explore and love our bodies in that sort of sexual way, right? Before we start entrusting someone else with that
Yeah.
responsibility and that gift.
Yes.
You mentioned also sensuality, and I wanted to share, like, it's a religious archetype to shame our sexuality. But it's also very Western centric. I know we're kind of breaking away from that now in mainstream, but if you look at other older religions or other older societies, especially
Mm-hmm.
Eastern practices, especially Hindu, like Hindu Indian practices. I mean, they created the Tantra, right? Like, they, and a lot of their gods and goddesses explore and talk about very
Mm-hmm.
openly about sexual power, and about, so it's not even shamed because they understand that sexuality and sensuality
Right.
are both very powerful forms of manifesting, but, like, also
Yeah.
the human experience, right? And pleasure is shamed a lot. It's weird because, like, they want us to get addicted to, like, these really shallow forms of pleasure, but whenever it comes to, like, us finding our light and self advocating, right, and finding self sovereignty, right, and finding pleasure in
Yeah.
being the journey of an entrepreneur or making money for ourselves, it's like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Like, you get shut down right away, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's wild. Like, it's just so fascinating. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. I don't want to make it seem like, oh my god, like, Essa is just like saying the world sucks. No, that's not true.
Yeah.
Just saying, like, you just have to have awareness, right? The awareness is really helpful in how you navigate.
What are you into now? What
Mhm.
is like, are you learning something new? What's been piquing your curiosity and interest lately?
So, what's been piquing my curiosity is, actually, I've been researching to go back and dance. So growing up, I used to dance ballet
Amazing.
folklorico. Uh-huh. Yeah, I know. And so I'm looking for an adult team, and I also want to start learning how to dance folk Peruvian dances. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really into body movement right now. My body and my spirit, it's like we need to move, and we
Mm-hmm.
want it. It's not about, like, oh, working out, pumping the muscles. It's more about, I want to do it through
Yeah.
dance, because dance is storytelling.
Oh, I've never
And I
heard
love
that. That dance
storytelling.
is storytelling. That's
Hmm.
beautiful. I've been feeling pulled to dance as well. Mainly like
Yeah.
salsa and bachata is what I've been doing.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah. You've been going to salsa, you've been
I
telling
am.
me. Yeah,
Yeah, I
you're
am.
still
I'm
doing
going
it then.
tonight and I've been going by
Good for
myself, which I really like
you.
as well. There's
Right?
a few things happening. I
Mhm.
think one, it's obviously I'm following when I'm dancing, so I'm not leading, meaning it's typically a guy that's leading.
Ah.
And the feedback that I've gotten is stop trying to lead
Yeah.
or stop trying to guess. feel it in your body, get out of your head.
I love it.
And I have, when I was younger, I
Yeah.
remember I loved dancing, but my parents were so busy taking my brother to soccer practice that I never was put on a dance team. And I was never put on a soccer team or anything like that because my parents were
Oh
just busy with my
no.
brother. So now that I'm older, it's almost like I'm almost nurturing my inner child, where it's like we could go dance, we could go do boxing, we
You
could do
are.
whatever we want now. And it's been so liberating, but I feel like the salsa and
Yeah.
bachata, one, I'm following, so it's allowing me to be led, which has been hard for me to do. But then secondly, it requires so much hip movement as well. It's almost like I'm reconnecting to like my sacral chakra and reconnecting to my sensuality and finding my own rhythm. So yes, I'm very in alignment with you. And then I also had a dream the other day that was like, we need to dance more, but not structured dance. So like maybe doing ecstatic dance or doing just dancing on my own, I think. So I'm going to explore that as well.
I'm so proud of you. Oh my god, that is amazing. I'm so proud of you. Ecstatic dance takes also a lot of courage to just be like, because we get so dancing, we get that's one of the common things you'll notice, Erica, that people don't like to do because
Yeah.
they think they have to perfect it, right? Or do it right. So it's like it's a vulnerability to dance and you get in your head like I'm going to
Yeah.
look silly, I'm going to look stupid, right? So ecstatic dance takes that to a whole nother level of like I'm just going to show up and embody, right? And this is going to look however it's going to look to people. But
Exactly.
like you said, you're feeling it. So Peruvian culture also has folklore, but it's not like
Mm.
the ballet folklorico. They
Mhm.
have different traditional folk dances. So it's again folk dances. You'll find that a lot across through Latin America, Latina cultures, because it was a form of also the Spaniards coming and using colonial influence, right? Because when you
Yeah.
think of Spain, you think of the flamenco dancers, right? That's folk dancing. So then it was
Mm.
integrated and merged with other cultures. So, yeah, I actually just came across a
Ah,
Peruvian
how
dance company
exciting.
last night in LA. Yeah, so I was thinking, I was like, because I want to do events, like obviously not like competitive dancing, but your groups can
Yeah.
sometimes go to like for Cinco de Mayo and do something or whatever, right? Dia de Muertos. So I want to do that. I want to like work my way up, obviously, because they got to like approve you to be like, all right, you're going to perform, They don't just let anybody willy nilly because you're just like
Yeah.
messing up the whole group's flow, you know?
Is there
So,
anything I didn't
mhm.
ask you that you'd want to share?
Well, I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, one thing that I've been coming across a lot in the collective is noticing there's an emphasis from people like not knowing how to transition, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you keep growing and you evolving in your craft in your business, whether that's your shifting services, you're adding to a service because you've grown so much from that wisdom that you know how now to provide your community with something more of depth or more leverage from the culmination of those
Mhm.
experiences as you data mine, right? So I think like I'm interested to hear your perspective. Like I think sharing how entrepreneurs who maybe have been doing this for like 3 years or 10 years, like how do we pivot? How do we allow ourselves to transform? Because a lot of times, like what I've
Yeah.
noticed in my journey is like I've had to let things go. Like at one point, I wanted to hoard and hold on to every skill and every service I had. It's like you can't do that. That's not healthy, because you have such an affinity for like, well, I started off with this, right, with this product or with this service or with this ideology, and it's like if you hold on to that,
Mhm.
then you're only blocking
Exactly.
more of your abundance.
Right? We can't hold on to everything, and the breath is such a great example of that. If all we
Mhm.
did was inhale, 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 we'd be dead, right? We literally have to like exhale so that we can inhale new air that serves our body. And I think it's the same with entrepreneurship. And it's so
Mhm.
timely that you bring this up because I'm in the middle of a shift. And I feel that entrepreneurship
Oh.
and life in general is a bunch of births and deaths, right? You're just like dying and reborn. And I feel like I'm going through
Mhm.
this cycle in my
Oh,
business
yes, you
where
do.
I let go of private one-on-one coaching. Now I just have group programs. And then now I'm even kind of shifting the way that I'm doing those. And now I'm like being called to be more I'm being called
Yes.
more into spirituality. And I'm like, how do I integrate this if I don't even know what I'm doing with it yet? So I think it's
I
so to
love
answer your
it.
question, it's inevitable. You're going to grow. And as somebody who worked in the tech field for 8 years,
Mhm.
I know that technology changes so quickly,
Oh,
and the people who don't evolve are the people who don't survive. So if you're resisting the
mhm.
change, you may stop growing, right? Where if you kind of dive
Yeah.
into the change, remember we were
Yeah.
talking earlier, you can make a decision and then change your mind again. You can always bring back a service if you really need to, but
Yes.
can you build
Yes.
the courage to let it go?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
bringing I feel like, especially you and I, as the entrepreneurs that we are, we have a community who follows us. And even just bringing the community along with us is
Mhm.
going to help that transition.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. And just also a reminder, I guess, or a thought as I reflected is to make sure like when you're shifting and you're expanding and when you're pivoting, like just make sure
Yes.
you're not doing it just to jump on trends. Like because then it's going to fall flat, right? It has to be something that just feels like a genuine like I've grown into this. I'm not going to do it just
Mhm.
because it's what the algorithm wants.
So even just asking yourself that question, where is this coming from?
Yes.
Because as I heard you
Example.
discuss that or explain that to us, I was like,
Mhm.
oh, that's why I had a successful career in tech, because I was manifesting from my ego. But now this business was
Yeah.
manifested from my soul because
Yes.
I was willing to make no money from it because I wanted to do it so bad.
Mhm. Yeah. Yes, and that's what a life purpose is. When people are like, "What's my life's calling, my life purpose?" And, you know, and you and I can help them, but
Mhm.
like deep down inside, your soul knows that, right? And it's that thing that you are so adamantly in love with that you want to do, right? That you're like, "I don't even care to make money off of this because it brings me joy, or I just
Yeah,
feel fulfilled, or I feel like I'm really fucking good at this, right? And I feel the most confident ever
exactly.
in my life."
Yeah, it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be your full-time thing. It can start off as a side hustle, which is exactly how mine started, and I'm sure yours did as well.
Yes. For like, you
Mhm.
know, 3 years just about. And then even then when I tried to go solo, I failed. I say that in
Yeah.
quotations, right? Because like I love failure. I'm not afraid to fail. I failed 3 times. I had to go back to like getting a corporate job or like,
Mhm.
you know, doing some sort of freelancing with corporate, you know, so I can sustain, you know. So that's another thing, like don't be embarrassed of your journey. If anything, that makes you more intriguing and more insatiable to people, like, you know, because then they find you inspiring. You don't have to be cookie cutter, picture perfect, and be like, I left my job, and in a year I had 100,000. It's like, no. If anything, that's gonna fall flat. People are gonna be like, you're full of yourself. You know, it's like, and if that was your story, that was your story. But like, also, people want to invest in understanding what your struggles were, because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
we do have this
Yeah.
human curiosity about struggles because it's part of the
Exactly.
journey,
Yeah.
right? The polarity,
Yes.
the light, the dark. Hmm.
It is.
So fun. I love entrepreneurship. It's wild. It really is. But it's a joy. I would not wanna go back to working for someone else as
I
soon as I
agree.
had
I
to
was
do it,
texting my friend the other
right?
day and I was like, I thought about quitting
Mhm.
again today, but then I thought about going back to tech and then I was like, nope, I'm not quitting.
So I'm not the only one who has those, like, those thoughts when you get tempted and you're
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
"Who am I
Yeah.
kidding? Hell no." Nice try. Nice try, mind.
Exactly.
You almost pulled a
So, a
fast one.
question for you. If
Yeah.
people obviously, I mean, I know people have enjoyed this podcast episode because I've enjoyed being like interviewing you and just having this conversation. So, let's say that people are like, okay, I'm really drawn to this. I
You're
loved
so
this
cute.
conversation. And they're maybe not
Mhm.
very in touch with spirituality, but they're
Mm,
spiritually curious.
mm,
What advice would you give people like that? And what
yeah.
would you say are the first
Yeah.
steps that people can take?
Yeah, yeah. So the first steps I would say to exploring your spirituality is learn across the board and
Mhm.
allow yourself to be influenced by different cultures and even different religions, right? Whether it's Hinduism or it's paganism, because I think that spirituality should be a mixture of a lot of different things you gravitate to. It's not just like, oh, I'm just the bruja and I'm just witchcraft, so I'm just like Mesoamerican witchcraft. It's like, no, my witchcraft has a lot of different influences, right? And so I think allow yourself the ability to be an open practice and explore, what vibes with you from certain cultures, certain religions. Again, don't misappropriate, right? We don't want to do cultural appropriation, but there's a way to apply that
Mm-hmm.
when you feel fondness of it, and find and invest in teachers, mentors in
Mm-hmm.
those cultures to give back, especially indigenous cultures, while you explore your spirituality. But aside from that, I would also encourage people to start reconnecting with their ancestry. And the first step is just like do a DNA test. Do a 23andMe, do an ancestry DNA, because that's going to help you start
Mm-hmm.
going back to your roots and where your family came from. And then research that region, research that land. Who are the people that walk that land? What are the customs there? What are the type of foods, right? Start with food. Food helps you really open up your spirituality down to making those dishes, right? And then you start tapping into your ancestors. You feel their presence there when you're making your
Mm-hmm.
enchiladas, right? Or whatever that is from your pueblo. So I would encourage you to start doing ancestral work. You don't need to know who was your great, 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 great grandpa, and you don't need to get that far just yet. Just start
Yeah.
reconnecting with your origin of roots. And from there, Erica, it just starts, you know how it is. It just starts unfolding on its own. You don't even have to ask, right? The messages and
Yeah.
the synchronicities are like boom, 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 right? Your spirit guides and your ancestors like, here you
Yes.
go. This is next.
Yeah.
This is next,
And obviously people
Mm-hmm.
can work with you, right? So I'm part of your Patreon. What else, like what other services do you
Oh,
offer and
yeah.
where can people find you?
Yeah, Patreon. Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, Esoteric Esa, and my website is souluminati.com. It's a play on the Illuminati, but you're operating from the soul. It's not evil. And the services I would recommend are, I think astrology and doing your natal chart is really fun because we can activate the ancestors. So we can look at ancestral, right? Gifts in those charts. We can learn a lot also about your cosmic DNA and understanding, because
Mm.
basically your astral chart is your soul's blueprint of what you want to learn, what you want to outgrow, what you want to achieve, and it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's a cheat sheet, but it's like the map. You're in the jungle, right? But now you have the map to navigate the jungle, and oh, stay away from there because there's the jaguars, and stay away from there because there's the howler monkeys. So it's like, I think astrology is a great tool that we don't talk about. It's more of like a
Mhm.
vein. Like right now we talk of it from like a vanity perspective, right? Which is fine, but I think there is a lot of depth to astrology that can help you tap into your
Yes.
soul pattern. I'm so happy we finally got to connect. I love your podcast. I'm so proud of you. And I've been hoping and wishing. I was like, oh, she better bring me onto this podcast. She better bring me onto this. And here we are, and I'm just so
Yeah.
grateful because I know that podcasts are there are babies.
I feel like you've kind of just been like one of the support systems behind the
Yeah.
scene. And as I mentioned, like you've helped me navigate really difficult decisions when I
Of
almost
course.
moved across the country and have had to like break things off. And you've just been such a great support system. And just, I mean, the act of you helping me feel safe to reconnect with spirituality, that in itself is it's invaluable. So I'm so glad that we did cross paths.
Oh, I love you. I am too. And I know that so many people say so many beautiful things about you back, Erica. I know people who've worked with you and they have nothing but beautiful things to say about your spirit. And I love that you're empowering other women. And this is a time, I just want to get on my soapbox real quick. As women and as femmes and as queer people and people who are part of the LGBTQ community, we have to support each other and lift each other up, because um that's the only way we're going to advance in the
Mhm.
spaces that we need to advance in and be seen. And especially, the patriarchy really attacks women and femmes and queer people. So let's just continue the message that we're allies, and
Yeah.
let's support each other. If let's get over our egos. If we can bring someone up with us, let's do that, because holding space together is really powerful. And if we don't take each other seriously,
Exactly.
then how do we
Yeah.
expect other communities to take us seriously? You know? So, and I know we're already doing that. We're already doing that, but I just want to remind everybody, because the astrology over the next 2 years is going to be really intense, where we're going to be really tested as a community, especially as women. We're already seeing that happen with our reproductive rights trying to be taken away, the queer community being attacked by politics, so we have to continue advocating for each other and our equal rights, and remember that we are allies in this journey, and together we can make waves and we can make an impact. And don't let anybody believe that you're not here for a reason. Everybody matters. Everybody has a story. I don't care if where you work at or what level you're at, if you're entry level, if you're trying to go back to college in your 40s, your story matters, and follow that path. You're doing it for a reason, and we need you. We need you here. We need you to show up. So don't give up. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Don't forget to write a review for Erica's podcast. Okay. When you put reviews, it helps push the podcast up in the algorithm. Okay. We need her to, get these
Thank
reviews
you.
in. Oh, yeah. My
Well,
podcast is Better Work Bitch. So we'll
yes,
link that down
it's a
below
great
too if you want to
podcast.
check me out. We talk
Amazing.
about some
Thank
cool
you.
stuff on there.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. Make sure to visit theericacruz.com. That's Erica with a K, where you can subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. You can help this podcast grow by supporting me with an Apple Podcast rate and review. If you took anything away from this episode, I invite you to take a screenshot and share it on social media so that your favorite badass Latinas can also check it out. Be sure to tag me at the Erica Cruz. That's Erica with a K, because I want to see it. If you're ready to join the revolution and be a part of the Courage Driven Latina community, visit couragedrivenlatina.com to get more information and join the waitlist. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.